Great. Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to our panelists. So we have a very great group here to talk about innovation, investment, and blue acceleration. So those of you who haven't heard the term blue acceleration before, this refers to the growth in blue economic activity. And when we consider the blue economy, there's a whole range of industries involved there: shipping, fishing, aquaculture, ports, cruise tourism, other kinds of coastal tourism, etc. But all of these sectors are growing in one way or another, and they combined, they are growing the overall blue economy. And so what we want to consider today is, what are the needs and opportunities and challenges of that blue growth, that blue acceleration, becoming and ensuring that it is sustainable and responsible as the use of the ocean continues to expand, and we need to take into consideration those cumulative impacts and the boundaries to that economic growth and activity. So we'll start by having each of the panelists give 2 or 3 minutes of their thoughts on this topic area, and we have a great range of experience from around the world. We'll start with Anne Carpenter, as you heard, Chief Executive Officer from Braid Theory. So Anne, you want to give us your thoughts on this topic?
Sure. So our company is a vertically integrated venture advisory firm, and we work only with very deep tech, engineering and science-led companies in all facets in the blue economy. And one of the things that I really think about, well, our tagline is proving collaboration works. We're Los Angeles based, and we do a lot of projects in and around the Southern California ports. When we started our company, we really tried to look at gaps in the market. What does it take to get the entrepreneurs out of the lab and actually into the market solving problems? And one of the things that I think about as, particularly for the Smart Ports Conference, is we need to go beyond collaboration and really think about the deeper complexities that are necessary to bring these solutions to market. So it's not just a simple transactional business model between one buyer and one seller when you're looking at the blue economy. You mentioned ports and shipping companies, logistics providers, unions. There's so many different actors that need to be a part of this solution. And the entrepreneurs and innovators that participate in it need to find a way to work within this complexity. So I'll tee up that way.
Great, thanks, Anne. And that, I think, will be a really recurring theme here, is the complexity of the blue economy, and particularly then as all of that complexity comes in and funnels into and out of the ports, and the special role that ports have to play in dealing with that complexity as economic growth in the ocean and coastal areas continues. So next we'll go to Andreas Schulze, co-founder and managing partner of Narwhale Ventures. So your thoughts, Andreas?
Yeah, Narwhale Ventures is a venture capital investor in we participate in early stage financing rounds of startups in the blue economy. I can just echo actually what Anne said. So we're also looking at sustainability driven companies in this area, and we see a huge opportunity coming, of course, from the what's happening on the regulatory environment. So we have there's more complex regulation in place, more stricter regulation coming, and we see a lot of opportunities and technologies covering offshore renewable energy. It's not only floating offshore energy, which is interesting, but also wave energy. The complete drone market, is it subsea or over the sea, is very interesting, what we are looking into. Then of course related to the boards, digitalization, smart ports is the topic of this event here. Yeah? So we see a big chance opportunity in big data, so how ports are collecting data, how ports are managing data, IoT of course, automated ports is a topic which will come in the next years, so that we have completely fully automated ports. And then of course aquaculture needs to be more sustainable. And when we talk about blue acceleration, what does it mean? It's actually the impact of humanity on the ocean. And when you see what happened in the past 20 years, like cargo shipping, the volumes have, I think, increased by 4 times. We have now desalination water, like 60, 70 million liters a day. Aquaculture is the strongest growing food sector since decades. So actually, yeah, the connection between humans and oceans are increasing, but I think we have to learn from our lessons from the past and do not repeat the mistakes we have done on land. And yeah, that's why we're looking at sustainable technologies that help to solve big problems.
That's right. And so technology and innovation really is a big part of tackling these issues. And as you say, we can learn from the terrestrial situation, but also there's a whole sort of new set of complexities and opportunities for technology and innovation. And so speaking of innovation, let's move over to Nathan Stempel, Chief Operating Officer at the Blue Institute Labs. Nathan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Super excited to be here. Blue Institute Labs is an accelerator and an incubator program for early stage startups, founder +1, +2 size teams, getting them to market and really honing their business models. And so being at Smart Ports, I really wanted to highlight two things that I think ports in particular are going to be crucial in getting some of these new emerging blue acceleration technologies to market, is really creating, facilitating value chains and keeping an eye on the sustainability piece. And so what I mean by value chains, I'll take offshore wind as a huge growing market as an example. There's estimates that say 17.3 jobs per megawatt of capacity are going to be created. In the United States right now, Blue Institute Labs is based out of Massachusetts, so we're United States. So in the United States, we have 40 megawatts of installed offshore wind capacity with a pipeline to get to 42 gigawatts. And so all of these jobs that are going to be created are across an entire value chain, from site surveys to the production of the components, the construction, the operations, maintenance, and then end of life for offshore wind. And so all of these companies will have to have a home, and I see the ports as a critical place to create clusters as a common node where a lot of these companies will be able to operate out of. And facilitating all of the infrastructure for these companies is something that's going to enable that value chain to scale offshore wind. And so this is going to be critical for a lot of innovations. We see a lot of entrepreneurs that fail because of timing, and they have a really good idea, but the market's not ready. And so when a port gets ahead of that, anticipates those challenges, and in parallel creates the value chain that will enable that idea to survive, it's going to really accelerate the blue acceleration even more. And then the port, as well as an international hub already, has such a good position from a global systems perspective of understanding some of the impact of these emerging technologies. And you're already seeing some initiatives such as the Green Shipping Corridor, where ports are able to create some stakeholder alignment over real changes that are adding to sustainability of how we utilize our oceans.
Yeah, and so the ports really serve as, through their natural function, as an integrator, because this is where everybody's got to connect up between the sea environment and the land environment. And so right at the interface there between the water and the land is TheDock. And so we've got Gartzman, co-founder and managing partner of TheDock, to bring his perspective here.
Thank you. Very honored to be here. By the way, I'm happy to see more and more accelerators, incubators around the world dealing with this sector, harnessing entrepreneurs and technology to work and leverage their tech excellence to solve those big problems. We look in it as additional deal flow to our fund. TheDock, in one line, is a venture fund focusing over maritime ports and logistics sectors. So we are flexible on technology, geography, stage, as long as it support those sectors. Our backers are global shipping companies like NYK and ports like PSA from Singapore and others. And we built a machine to listen to their challenges and needs, and to find technologies and entrepreneurs to solve those challenges. The good news is there is more and more industry corporates that are ready to adopt new technologies to solve their needs. And also more and more entrepreneurs are tapping into the sector and knocking on our doors. Definitely the challenge to digitize and to do all the transparency issues easier for the customers of the industry. And also to decarbonize the industry and to decarbonize the supply chain, again, for the customers in the industry, is giving a very positive push on the industry to adopt those technologies. And we are working day in, day out to screen and look for those technology that can scale, deliver, and be a great platforms in the future. Last comment, I want to build on the great insights by Anne about the complexity of the industry with port authorities, port operators, towage companies, shipping lines, customs, government, you name it. This is a good news for us, because for all of us as investors, because once you find those bold entrepreneurs that crack this business model, how to work it, it's very hard to replicate those success stories once they are in and understand all the complexities within the market.
So you've got it's really a focused, bespoke approach to those partnerships and those deals to really customize the relationships to achieve success in the investment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But at the same time, to segue off of that, then we've got this scale. So we've got a global economy which is dependent upon the ocean economy and all of this transaction and interaction amongst with the physical movement of goods through the shipping industry, the seafood resources, the energy that comes from the sea, the submarine cables, all of this. So we do need to be able to scale those. So even though things need this customized approach, how do we make sure that we're scaling, learning sustainability and scaling sustainability, and how does innovation really help make that scaling happen, Anne?
Well, I'd like to address that because scaling has to be thought of not just from the entrepreneur point of view, but from the ecosystem. It's organizations like all of us here that can help facilitate it, because developing the relationships within a port ecosystem is incredibly difficult. There are so many layers and so many relationships, and for an entrepreneur to try to take it on his or herself is virtually impossible. So scaling is not just for the companies to scale, but for organizations that are the incubators, the accelerators, the deep understanding investors who know this domain, who can actually help with that complexities. And then you made a comment about how ports can integrate what they're doing naturally. Well, as we're starting to hear from today's conversations, and has been happening for a while, is ports do need to step up from being sort of the passive landlord port to an active participant along with the other stakeholders within the port ecosystem.
And in that sense, do you all from the investment and innovation side feel that there's enough connection between let's say the port users, the industries that are coming in and out of the port? You've mentioned wind, and we've touched upon fishing and shipping, of course. Are the industries that are the tenants and the users of the port, are they connecting up well enough with the port ecosystem to work on these shared sustainability issues, or do we need to facilitate that more? Is that happening naturally, or?
So, if I could jump in.
Sure.
Please.
I think there's a real opportunity for each port to kind of carve out a niche to have a strategic advantage. And so when they get ahead of some of these innovations, they can look to attract the talent of that value chain to create a cluster. And once they create a cluster, there's positive feedback that really will create a true financial incentive for that port to double down on, say marine bio is another emerging thing that I know Anne knows a lot about. So there are relationships that may exist in the future. Like, I've never really heard of pharmaceuticals operating out of port operations, but when we talk about some of the new enzymes that are being produced in the marine environment, like maybe those are relationships that don't exist today, that will enable some of these new value chains that will really allow the scale as one port kind of takes the lead and creates their strategic advantage around that.
But in creating that strategic advantage, which of course there's competition amongst ports for the business, for the activity, but we also need to be thinking about the scaling issue in terms of achieving sustainability. Do any of you feel that the investment community or the innovation process need to be also, though, facilitating that interaction that leads to sharing of knowledge, sharing of best practices, even though that kind of maybe is a counter trend to achieving a specialty that it gives you a competitive advantage? So we've got kind of two opposing trends there.
Well, You know, I think it's always that push-pull between, you know, like local growth and support of your, you know, local ecosystem and the global community. But, you know, as we are hearing more and more, the fact that chain ports and smart ports exist is ports around the world are understanding that they can't stay within the silos. And ultimately, you know, I mean, I hate to say this over and over, but the rising tide lifting all boats. There really is something to that because as you saw from those acceleration statistics around TEUs moving around the world, or the number of microorganisms found in the ocean, or number of acres of marine protected areas growing, everything is growing at an exponential rate. So the opportunity, we don't have to look at that direct competitive role because there's so much opportunity for all of us in the ecosystem to excel.
And how, from the investment side, Nir and Andreas, what's your thoughts on that?
I believe that our duty in this food chain of blue innovation and blue acceleration is to vet all those visionary, sometimes hallucinating and founders, and to find those ones that can participate, be part of the future connected and digital ports. The ports look on hundreds of startups, and he tried to understand what to adopt. It's very hard. Nobody fired for buying an IBM, right? But when you buy a startup, if the startup fails, so it's your responsibility as the port executive that adopt it. So it's very hard. So we help those ports to say, hey, we saw hundreds of teams of entrepreneurs. We invest in those 10, those 12s. We vet them. Please use them in order to scale them around your network. And hopefully there is a true win-win between private companies and private venture capitalists like TheDock and others, to ports and the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. Andreas, do you agree with that?
I can just echo what Nir said. So actually, I think international cooperation is very important, even for small startups, because the problem they are working on, maybe somewhere in Europe, is the same problem in Asia. And this is also the reason why we actually at Narwhale we have a presence in Asia and in Europe, and also try to match startups, because there might be one startup working on one problem in Europe, and we know there's another one in Singapore, and you should just match your synergies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, then maybe on the investor side, I think there's still a lot of investor education to be done on the blue economy. So when we meet LPs, a lot of us, what is the blue economy? And then I think it will take some more time to convince investors about the opportunities in the blue economy. Because SDG 14 is still one of the, I think it's the least unfunded.
Least funded SDG, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. And so in this context of startups and ports and these sets of issues, what do you think startups really want to see from ports to better engage and accelerate the work that they do and their contribution to the blue economy?
Well,
I think Anne has some thoughts on that.
because we've been pushing at it for so long, a lot of it is problems list. We always want an active conversation about what is keeping you up at night, because entrepreneurs fundamentally are problem solvers. Second of all is we need funding related to paid pilot projects where we have active, engaged participants from all of the stakeholders. It could be port authorities, terminal operators, shipping companies, whatever it is, to actually get not just a trial, does this technology work, but to really share back and forth the deep domain expertise from the port stakeholders with the entrepreneurs, so that you are, I don't want to overuse the term co-creating, because it's not really that, but it's really that very frank flow of knowledge and sharing to get across, so that the products that come from the entrepreneurs are better, and the port is, within the port community. I'm just going to use port as a term to encompass the entire community, but those pilots where they really are making sure that solution is fitting the need, And finally, the third part, which is totally critical, is innovation departments have to be connecting to the procurement departments so that there's a clear pathway when there is a successful pilot project, that there is a pathway to true contracts. And that seems to be right now where we're falling off a cliff.
And would you, that's a great segue into the next key point we wanted to cover here in terms of what are the biggest challenges facing startups in responding to the blue technology opportunities, and to deal with that point at which they're not getting the support or the resources needed to move further along. Other thoughts on that?
So I'm a strong believer in public-private partnership and partnership between private investors and the ports, authorities, and municipalities, because the way to solve it is to put more people with skin in the game. If there is budget allocated from the ports, from the EU, from the government to solve those problems, and somebody from the port authority have to sign on a budget to co-create those solutions with the startup, he's responsible for the success story to make sure that this pilot will convert into a commercial agreement at the end. Most of the startups are very, very weak globally in any sector in bringing pilots to commercial agreements. And we try to solve this challenge day in, day out. And when you look on the TheDock portfolio, out of 14 companies, so one layer below, half of them get matching funding from Israel Innovation Authority, EU funding, government-backed, municipal-backed matching grants. And this is, in our perspective, a great catalyst to make it work.
Yeah. Also, it really depends on the stage that the startup is in as well, right? The early stage founders have a very different problem set than someone who's received their Series A investment and is ready to scale. And so I think ports have a decision to make as to where they think they would best plug into that ecosystem. And we see a lot more ports stand up their own incubators and their own innovation cells, which is fantastic. And so there's has to be an understanding throughout the whole ecosystem where each of these centers are, so that entrepreneurs understand where to gravitate to based on the problems they're trying to solve and the stage that they are in their company.
And in this process, are we getting enough focus from the startup world, from the entrepreneurs on the sustainability issues? Or do the investors need to push that further? Or what's the dynamic there? You know, or is that a trade-off between what's most likely to be economically viable, but what society needs or the ports need?
Yeah, I think it's clearly LP-driven. Yeah? So I think there's no money now for any startups that doesn't have a sustainability approach in their business model. Mm-hmm. So I think these times are, especially in Europe, maybe driven by Scandinavian investors, but also by other institutional investors. Yeah, it's very important. So we have in Europe now a classification, for example, for investment funds, SFDR 8, SFDR 9, impact funds. Yeah, so with a very clear focus that you also, as a fund manager, you need to have an impact focus in your fund, and that sorts out all these startups that, do not qualify. Yeah?
So they're basically not going to get through the hoops if they don't have that sustainability as a key part of what they're addressing?
Yeah, but you also have to make sure that there's also a sustainable business model that goes along with it. So often we see startups that come through that say, oh, we're solving, we're saving the ocean, and it's going to have such a big impact on the ocean, and they haven't found a credible business model that's going to make the company survive and be sustainable. So that balance has to be there, and you can't hide behind the sustainability or the the SDGs or anything else as a way of legitimizing why you should be working on that problem. You still, there's a responsibility to figure out if that solution is so important from a sustainability standpoint, then you have a responsibility to find a way to keep scaling it so that solution makes it through beyond just because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's got to be viable as an economic opportunity. Are there other drivers to that push, though, that link between sustainability and technology development? Maybe we'll go with Nir and then come back to Andreas.
Yeah, fully agree with Tan. At the end, I strong believer in Gates mentioned in his last book that the Gates Foundation will invest only in solutions that can be in 1% and above in the global impact of carbon footprint in the next decades. So when we look on those solutions, We have to understand the business model can rely also on grants or government or regulation, but it's have to be there, a sustainable growth business model that allow this company to scale, because unless it will be scaled, it will not be impactful. So it's a very mandatory principle in every deal that we look into.
Andreas, did you want to add
Maybe
to
just
that?
a comment on regulation. I think this is also very important for startups. On the one hand, it offers a great opportunity. For example, next year, I think beginning of January, we have this carbon efficiency index from the IMO coming into force. So this is actually will penalize ships who are not run on an energy efficient way. This also offers a huge opportunity for green hydrogen, for everything that is related to actually make ships more efficient. But on the other side, regulation is also a difficult topic for startups, because they have to be aware of the regulatory environment they are operating in and also want to export in.
Yeah, so really those drivers for change and for innovation, regulation, a key one, but others that really lead to that, both sustainable business that delivers sustainability through a process of interaction, communication with the port, in which the ports really identify their needs. And I think what we really see is that it's sort of open and collaborative organizations and companies and investors like all of you represent that create the facilitation of that process. And clearly, without those intermediaries and that interactive process, we're not going to get the speed and the scale that we really need. So thank you, all of you, for being here to help us really consider that blue acceleration situation, the role of innovation, the role of investment in achieving sustainability, helping ports grow in a responsible and in a way that really ensures that we're dealing with the challenges that the ocean is facing. Not a small set of issues to deal with, but great to have all of you here and great to be a part of Smart Ports again this year. So with that, we'll close off this session and hand back to our MC here as we wrap up. Thank you.